Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Welcome to another episode of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you for always choosing this podcast every single week. And we are so happy that you have decided to come along on us with the journey of this show that we designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is the forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and every week I have the honor to co-host this show with Craig Brown. Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig.
Hey, Thom. I'm looking forward to the next battle. I hope Mark's ready.
You know, that's what we're doing today. It is our third installment in what we call the Digital Battle. This is round 3. And every week, what we do with this podcast, whether we're doing the battle, whether we have a career-focused interview, or if we're interviewing somebody around technology, we try to bring to this podcast interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help everybody grow and enhance their careers. And that's what I love about these digital battles, is we take the point and the counterpoint, and you and Craig and Mark Pendergast kind of fight over which way should people be going. And I don't know if we ever solve anything in these battles, but it's a lot of fun. So Mark Pendergast, welcome back to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Thom, it's good to be here as always, and certainly I always enjoy these battles. Craig and I actually started the battles at conferences before we ever got together, but I think we both have very strong opinions, and I think it's nice that we bring up topics that don't have a right answer, where you want to know the thought process that goes into it. And that's why I don't know that Craig or I ever win the battle, but we get a lot of information out on the table, and we're both passionate about it. So we do bring, kind of almost a decision framework with us as we battle.
For the audience, that's what you should listen for, is how many times we switch our sides during the discussion. It's been known to happen.
So much like Craig, Mark has a long, nice career in this whole world around PLM. And now he actually volunteers. He serves as the trustee for content for the Digital Enterprise Society. And the Digital Enterprise does a lot of content offerings, both through this podcast, through seminars, and other things, so that all of the listeners to this show can find different ways to learn and grow their careers. So Mark, thank you for all that you do. So are you guys ready for round 3 of the digital battle?
Bring it on.
I don't know. We'll see.
Today, we're going to talk about the difference, the decisions around should you go best in breed or an integrated suite. So let's get started. Mark, why don't you define what we mean by best in breed?
Okay, well, best in breed is a philosophy, a strategy for a business to pick the best tools that they can get for each of the individual functions that they perform. Normally we'd be talking about engineering here, but it really applies to anything. And in the bad old days, that's all you had, because you had a bunch of little companies and you had to pick whatever tools you thought would work for you and then glue them all together into some integrated whole for a process. And I think that's still where we are. Although there are a lot of integrated suites, not all of them are of the level of quality that you need to have to get your job done. And certainly in best of breed, we're emphasizing the productivity of the individual engineers, making them effective, making them make good decisions over the sharing of data with the rest of the organization. Because as Craig and I argued last time, I can just customize that in for the little bit that I need.
So Craig, why don't you define what we mean by an integrated suite?
So an integrated suite of tools, probably, or at least the measure of success of an integrated suite, is you improve the overall business. You're able to move faster. So you're not worried about getting the best scalpel for the surgeon, but rather you're worried about making sure the information flows as seamlessly as possible through the organization. Integrated suites have this sort of promise or vision that if you just integrate the data well, then the flow from one tool to another will go pretty quickly, and it'll enable you to be more efficient in your corporation. Now, I said that cautiously. There's lots of people that profess they have an integrated suite, and some of them they develop from the beginning, and they're pretty good. Others are not so good. They just did acquisitions, and then they didn't really invest to make sure the things fit well together. So when I say integrated suite, I mean one that are already fitting well together. It's just not a grocery bag full of tools you got in the acquisition business, but rather you made it work really well, streamlining the data, streamline the flow of data through product development. So integrated suites and streamlining of data go together for me. And I think that's the point I want to make with Mark today is best in breed's great until you get to flowing of the data, and then it doesn't flow. But anyways, we'll see.
So are we really in a place where we can do one or the other, excuse me? Are we really in that place? I mean, have we gotten there?
Well, I guess I'll jump on that one. I don't think we're there everywhere. As Craig said, there's pockets of places where people have done a really nice job of tying some tools tightly together, and it actually makes a suite that's maybe not perfect have an advantage over one that has some tremendous power, because the tools do interact very quickly where that's important. On the other hand, as Craig said, there's a lot of companies that have quote unquote integrated suites that are integrated only in the marketing brochure and don't talk to each other at all. And that's difficult.
Yeah, that's funny you say it that way, Mark, because I've found marketing brochures from the same company that conflicted with each other. It was quite fun bringing those companies together. There are two sales guys, the one from maybe simulation and the one from maybe program management, and say, how come you guys don't agree? You're at the same company. But anyways, that's a war story. So I think, Thom, to the question you asked, I don't know. It baffled me at different points in my career the last 10 years how well things were integrated and how poorly they were integrated. The thing that resonated with me most about best of breed is when it becomes obsolete. And I don't mean the tool becomes bad. I mean the need for the tool becomes not needed anymore. And so the flexibility of moving away from a best in breed solution to whatever you need next, because maybe you manufacture differently now. That transition is difficult when you got, if you will, zealots, I'll call them zealots, who are convinced their best in breed solution is the only game in town. And they get so invested in the ownership of that they don't want to consider other things. It's really sad, right? Because they end up becoming a tax when at one point they were an enabler. So I'd like to think you don't have to choose, but the truth is when some innovation shows up, almost always it starts with a best of breed tool, even if you have to build it yourself, right? A custom tool, which one of our earlier discussions that Mark and I had here about, well, when do you need to customize? Well, there are times, as we've talked about before. So I'm not sure you would choose either, but I'm telling you, if flow of data is your problem, you need an integrated suite. And flow of data is a big problem in a lot of places.
So if inside a company, they're going to go one way or the other, what would be the key factors that would take them to picking a side?
Okay, well, I guess I can take a crack at that one. Certainly, the biggest one is, can you find an integrated suite that aligns with your needs? If you can, that's probably the best option. If you can't, or if, let's say, you're a middle-of-the-road company, you're just doing kind of boring stuff. You're putting together toasters or whatever, and you don't need that cutting-edge analysis of complex systems integration and simulation and data acquisition and things like that. It's just a toaster. So you could probably go with a suite that's simpler because your needs are simpler. But as you start pushing the envelope and you're going to autonomous vehicles and you're going to, launch the next mission to Mars, you're dealing with things nobody does. In fact, to Craig's point, you may be inventing tools to solve problems where you're not even exactly sure what the problem is. Mm-hmm. And that's where best of breed drives you to the edge. Who's the next guy who's come up with a cool idea? Who's the next college professor who spun off a company? And can they move us forward and solve this problem that I can't solve through traditional means? So a big dividing line is, as Craig said, startups, or, maybe cutting edge, in which case they need best in breed, or they may be making toasters, in which case they don't need anything quite that way. Or they may be so huge they're going to Mars, or they're building the autonomous network for the United States vehicle to everything communication. They're probably going to need some stuff that nobody's thought of before.
So you're reminding me of one of my experiences where I had competing best of breed tools to cope with. And so this is my counter argument for integrated suite. When you get to the place where the best of breed is competing with each other, and we won't go into the details because it's embarrassing to those involved, but at the end of the day, if as the leader, you're overlooking this and you've got a key measure of your company. So we were talking about key measures, but I got 3 best of breed tools, all of them making their case why they're better than the other 2. That's a good time to go to an integrated suite. And you just make it a public fly off, and you say the best one's going to be partnered with our favorite outsourced supplier because we really don't want the life cycle cost of best of breed. By the way, that's another whole discussion about how do you keep it running? And Mark's laughing because he knows so. I think if you want to look at measures, if you have competing tools, best of breed tools in different departments, probably different parts of your company, from planning to problem resolution or whatever, there's a clue. That means to me, the tool technology is mature because there's multiple samples of it. Well, if it's mature, it belongs in an integrated suite because it's no longer a discriminator. It's becoming a common way of working. If it's a common way of working, why would I invest extra money in it? It's not a competitive advantage. I shouldn't do that. So,
well, I think that's a good point, Craig. There's a cleavage point there where the cost of best of breed versus the cost of just having a vanilla tool that works is really that differentiator. And, I talked about that just a little bit ago, is you should go to best of breed when it's making you money. And you should not go to best of breed if it's just something you use and you got to have one. No. And usually the clear differentiator is if there's 20 of them on the market, it's probably not one that's that head and shoulders above the other.
Correct. So a topic on our podcast has been around additive manufacturing. So for those of you that maybe don't get the term additive versus subtractive, a lot of manufacturing is melt something, put it in a mold, take the mold apart, and then finish tooling it, right? Well, the mold has to come apart. It has to be able to move in a certain dimension, or the drills have to move in a certain dimension. That's all removing manufacturing. Additive manufacturing, printing, right? Using a printer technology to build up layers of a new product. It's actually cool because you can now design parts you could never have manufactured with removal manufacturing. Okay, so now I need a best of breed additive design tool. And design tools have been waiting for this because they knew they could have designed other in the virtual world where you don't worry about this. They could design parts that could be a lot lighter in weight, for instance, which is a big deal for fuel economy. But you could never mass produce them because you couldn't figure out a way to get the drills or the molds or presses or whatever in and out. So my point there is best of breed sometimes follows technology, meaning we need the best of breed tool for the technology. And then as a former PLM leader, what I want, darn gosh, I want that thing integrated into the suite, right? I do not want to find out that I got to go buy a different PDM system just because it's a particular best of breed additive manufacturing tool. So I think it follows technology curves, but the speed with which we get them in the integrated suite is a big deal. And I think if enough people make it clear that's a goal, then they move pretty quickly. It matures. Once it gets mature, it's no longer a competitive advantage. If it's not a competitive advantage, put it in the suite. So anyways, yeah. Mark, what do you think?
Well, I think that's the good front end of it, but I look at the back end of it too. And what I've seen is a lot of the integrated suite vendors, once they get that tool in the suite, they no longer invest in it. And it starts to fall behind to the point where you can't even use it anymore. And now you've got pieces of the suite they care about, like the CAD tool and CAD vaulting. And you got pieces of the suite that are like, well, yeah, we got one here. See, it's on the marketing brochure. But they've not invested in it for 20 years, and it's just limping along, and you're saying, my guys can't even get work done anymore.
So this is a really good point, because, there's nothing that frustrates a PLM leader more than seeing an acquisition that you kind of wanted to have happen because there were strengths in both parties, and you thought, well, together they'll be even stronger. And then the investment goes down. And I remember a distinct conversation I had with one person in particular. And I said to him, why the heck did you stop investing? And they very politely said to me, like I was stupid, well, we got your business. And I'm like, oh, great, thanks. But your point's a good one. We need performance KPIs, right? Mm-hmm. On the tool vendors to say, yeah, when you make those acquisitions, we expect, in fact, we'll give you a bonus. We expect you to have the same degree of innovation. We do not expect innovation to drop. In fact, because you can save some packaging and some sales dollars, we would expect your innovation budget to go up, not to go down. So I think this is a measure, not the amount, because you can never control that, but you could measure, did it go up or did it go down after the acquisition? And if it didn't go up, that's strike one. A few more strikes, you can reconsider the integrated solution vendor, seems to me.
Yeah, well, I think that's really the key is a lot of times they just want the integrated suite to cover everything, even if it doesn't work.
So they're doing it for revenue, just to claim a revenue claim. Yeah. Well, we're the biggest or whatever. Right?
Yeah, get a new customer base and then try and force their stuff. And integrated suite vendors tend to focus on one part of the suite to the exclusion of some of the others. And they'll put in this piece just to say they got it, but they're more interested in this. And all innovation dollars tend to flow to one half of the suite, and the other half just kind of dies on the vine. And you find in best of breed, those guys know they're best of breed, and they're going after the cutting edge all the time. Sometimes, to ridiculous levels where they're putting in stuff that no one would use in 1,000 years. But, at least they're pushing the envelope trying to figure it out. And if you suggest things that sound interesting to them, they're going to go after it. I remember once that I was trying to do some simulation for cardboard packaging. I was working with our packaging group, and they had to drive trucks over railroad tracks to try and see the tolerance of the packaging. And I said, I talked to our simulation guys, why can't you guys do this? It's just cardboard. I mean, it's just a structure. Pound it around virtually. Well, they kind of went away, and our guys lost interest in it because they like driving the trucks. But a year later, they had a seminar, do virtual package testing with our software because they wanted, they said, hey, that's a big market. And they put the resources in it and they got there. If you talk to an integrated suite vendor, he'd say, I got the tool. What do you want? Figure it out yourself.
Yeah. So staleness in large, let me just call it that, staleness in large, right? Or becoming lazy in large. That's a real challenge for I think what we do at the Digital Enterprise Society. And I think we as users, so authors as well as consumers of digital design information, we gotta call them to task. We got to say, yeah, you made it better, or no, you made it worse. When that company you acquired was a separate company and it was best in breed, and there was no question in anybody's mind that they were best in breed. Now you're just mediocre. That's not something to hang your hat on. I mean, the only time that would be okay in my book is that best of breed thing just no longer matters. Maybe like this is so bitter, like internal combustion engines. I mean, we got another 20 years before we really say that. But anyways,
or drafting.
Well, yeah,
drafting's not a differential. Everybody does drafting. They do everything you could possibly do in drafting. Why would you go get a best in breed drafting solution?
Yeah, well, that's one of
the oldest tools around.
Yeah.
So it's matured, and it's not a differentiator. Nobody goes to the market saying we're the best drafters in the world, right?
So one thing that I want to dwell a bit on, and so Mark, I have a question for you, is what happens with the best of breed tools when nobody's at home to take care of them? I mean, that's one of the business problems is, gosh darn it, I don't want to be dependent on a best of breed tool and then the founder or the creator or whatever decides to go do something else. I mean, it's a risk, right? I mean, for sure it'll become stale then because it won't be improved after that point. So how do you handle that? I mean, what's your way to make sure best in breed stays best in breed?
Well, you pick good vendors, and sometimes you have no choice. There's only one, and you got to go with them. You hope that they go forward and do good things. Again, when the founder retires and gets in his yacht on the Bahamas, you hope he had a succession plan of some sort. But if you're in the best of breed world, turnover of tools is something you just do.
Oh, that's
I know.
So you just go to the next one. Okay.
Yeah. See, when you know where I came from, we were cutting edge, and it was not unusual for us to turn over tools every 7 years. In fact, when my PLM system that I deployed went over 10 years, people were shaking their heads going, nothing lasts 10 years. Everything's gone in 7.
At least in the software world. Right.
So we were, it wasn't a problem because, again, we were bleeding edge. We were trying to do autonomous vehicles. We were trying to cram more stuff into a smaller package in a car, under the hood, wherever you wanted it. And we made money because we had tools that could let us do that. And if we had mediocre tools, we would have had mediocre products, and we wouldn't have been able to do that. Again, if I was making a toaster, I wouldn't care. But our division, as soon as something became a toaster, we got out of it. We sold it to somebody, and we moved on to the next one that was impossible to do. Yeah. When I hired in, that was one of the things that was intriguing to me, that, yeah, we basically only do things that are impossible to do because that's where we make our money. Once they become possible and everybody can do it, we get out of it and we move on to the next one.
Yeah, because somebody else will be the low cost. Yeah, that's interesting. So
I think we're finding a cleavage line here between the people that are really pushing the envelope, who are going best in breed, and the people that are maybe doing things that are more routine, making staplers and scissors and bricks and whatever.
Or even internal combustion engines, to pick on mature technology. But anyways.
So I have a question for both of you. How often do you see a company who has an integrated suite solution, who a certain department decides to go rogue and go get some best of breed tools, and then how do the companies deal with that?
Oh, well, we do that all the time. It's called acquisition. Every time you acquire somebody, they have all their own integrated suite or best of breed or whatever they do, and you bring them in, and then you got to either beat them into submission or let them keep running. And it's a ticklish decision on which one you do. But I think fundamentally, I see that all the time. And you go to the chief engineer and you say, hey, you're wasting a lot of money on this tool. And he says, my guys love it. And they're producing products and we're making money like crazy. Leave me alone. So I think that's the bottom line. If you're making money, you get kind of a pass. Yeah. And when you stop making money, then all of a sudden everybody's all over you trying to make you efficient. So I think that's kind of what I see. Craig?
Well, I agree with your example. And I was thinking about an earlier discussion we had before we started the podcast today about being forced to use somebody else's design tool. So I'm talking about different disciplines now. So electrical engineering being forced to use mechanical engineering design tools. And we had a research group at General Motors, which worked on electric vehicles for decades. And sure enough, somewhere along the way, we said, okay, it's time to no longer be R&D, bring them into engineering. And so in that domain, the research and development domain of a car company, of course we had all kinds of best of breed tools. That's the nature of the business. So we not only allowed that, we probably encouraged it. But as we brought them in, we had to say, okay, but this is what we use for mechanical CAD. And at the time, I had the assignment help the R&D guys get into product engineering. And it was interesting to have the discussion about ECAD tools, printed circuit board tools, and the simulation tools around that. And so at the end of it all, I ended up being their lobbyist to the rest of the company to say, look, electronic design and thermal management of PCBs and other things, printed circuit boards, is a big deal. And the mechanical, just the equations of heat transfer, yeah, they're fundamentally the same, but here's why they're different. And I was able to make the case so that in effect, they got an advocate on the inside that said, why should we stay with this? Well, guess what? You go to electric vehicles in mass 10 years later, and which tools matter more? Well, guess what? So sometimes you need to keep them around, the best in breed, because it might be where your business goes to. And, I don't know any better answer than to tell you, well, that's where your product awareness, your market awareness and technology awareness mapped to tools is really important. And if you're mapped to an integrated suite and the suite has gaps in it, then you owe it to your company to say, these are the gaps and we're going to have to fill them somehow or do our own tools because, we intend to be the leaders in this technology, electric motors, additive, whatever. And if we're going to be the leaders, then we need these tools. Turns out the big integrated solution vendors, they're like, you need that for that reason. And they pick up on it. And pretty soon somebody becomes an acquisition target, right? So you got to be careful with these conversations. But I think that is a clue. You do allow best of breed in your innovative research groups, and then at least in a big company, on your way to mass production, you have to go through a decision process. And I'm not going to give you the clue. It's probably a secret how you want to do that. But you do go through a process to decide, is it important enough to leave it there and integrate it manually or otherwise, or do we convince our key vendor that thing is a technology worth mainstreaming? Because if it goes into the integrated suite, it'll be mainstream, i.e. your competitor will get it. And so, I think that's kind of the question you ask, is this so important? Do I keep it separate? And if I want to keep it separate, then I better leave it as a best of breed.
Yeah, I think, Thom, one of the things you said was, the circuit board stuff was different. And, all the equations behind there are the same as they were in the punch card days. And what I see on a lot of these best in breed solutions is not that it's the analysis, it's the setup of the problem. Yeah, and those circuit board thermal things, they say, I assume I have a circuit board. I assume there's components on it. You just got to kind of tell me where they are. And I know what traces are, and I know what all this stuff is in this domain. So I'm best in breed for this kind of thing. Or maybe I'm looking at ASICs, or maybe I'm looking at, fluid properties thermal instead of solid properties thermal. And different tools, the front end helps you set up the problem so much more quickly. So I could take that circuit board, I could go into a mechanical thermal analysis program, but then I'd have to teach that program what a circuit board is, what a trace is, and it's that savings of the setup almost more than the analysis capability sometimes that drives you to best in breed, because you've got a unique scenario. Some college professor wrote the front end essentially, and lo and behold, you can do in an hour what it took you 3 weeks to do.
Yeah, so there's one other measure that we haven't really talked about, and that is what's more important, authoring or setup, as you were talking about, a simulation, or being able to view it in the context of other decisions. And I think this is one of those balancing points that's tough for companies to get through. We always talk about authoring because it feels like it's a constraint, right? But in fact, making decisions with the information might be more the constraint. And so streamlining for what I call consumers or users of the information, not the creators, that's a completely different metric. If you've decided in your company that streamlining for use is the most important thing, you will go integrated suite, because at least those guys at those companies have been driven by, we want dashboards, we want to be able to see mechanical and thermal and electrical and embedded software in the same domain, the same user interface. And while the specialists might groff at that and they might want their own system, the generalists, the people making decisions, like a chief engineer role, making decisions, they want that single user experience. So,
well, provided it's a user experience.
Okay.
I remember back in the day when my favorite vendor told me I can vault electronics design data. And all you do is put it in a zip file and hang it on this record, and we'll call it this kind of mechanical CAD file.
Yeah.
And it was integrated.
That's like Mark's filing cabinet, but never mind.
But, you know, a lot of the integrations are of that level of poorness. Also, you've got best in breed tools that'll say, oh, I'll take that simulation, I'll let you set boundaries around it, and I'll let the downstream people rerun it slightly differently. So, it's another best in breed tool. Nobody in a suite's going to do anything like that.
Okay.
So,
as we wrap this up, is it fair to say that in 2021, there's no clear answer to integrated suite versus best in breed?
I think what you're going to come down to is use cases. I think that's what Craig and I have been dancing around is you can't pick a solution until you understand your problem. And you need to look at your problem, and is your problem flowing data downstream and upstream? Is your problem being able to have everything on one screen? Is your problem you're trying to be the best in breed product, so you need best in breed tools, or are you just making toasters?
So, Craig, I know this is dangerous, but I'm going to give you the last word.
So innovation by its nature was going to create best of breed. It just will. New kinds of materials, new kinds of problems to solve. How do I take all these existing chips I might have and make them work in today's cars where we have a chip shortage? I just heard about this from a person from Cummins a couple of days ago, and I didn't even think about it that way. And the problem that they're trying to solve is the chips that are available. So best of breed happens with innovation. It just does. And suites, integrated suites happen when they're no longer a competitive advantage. That's what I would leave you with. When it's not a competitive advantage, make it integrated. Go tell your vendor to integrate it.
Well, these digital battles are always informative and exciting, and it's always fun to have Mark here on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Mark, thank you for joining us again.
Thanks, Mark.
Welcome.
All right.
It's fun to be here.
All right. And everybody who listened, make sure that you join us next week for more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. Remember this, the Digital Enterprise Society is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Go check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.